Welcome to tonight's sleep story. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. The village was quiet in the early morning hours, the sun just beginning to stretch its first golden rays across the horizon. The air was cool, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves in the trees. Gerda, the young adventurer, stood at the edge of her home, gazing out over the landscape. Before her stood the towering mountain of the Goblins, its peak hidden in the mist. The villagers had long whispered about the dangers lurking there, but Gerda felt only a quiet thrill. The mountain represented something more than just danger. It was a challenge, a place of mystery and possibility. Her mind buzzed with thoughts of what might lie beyond the veil of mist. Legends spoke of treasure hidden deep within the mountain, guarded by the clever, mischievous goblins who lived there. But for Gerda, the pull of the mountain wasn't about treasure, it was the unknown, the adventure, and the chance to prove herself. For as long as she could remember, the villagers had spoken of the mountain with fear and trepidation, a place to avoid at all costs. But Gerda wasn't like the others. She had always been different, more daring, more curious, and perhaps more naive than most. Go, Gerda, her grandmother had told her the night before, her voice filled with a strange mix of fear and pride. But be careful, for the mountain holds secrets that may not wish to be found. Gerda had nodded, feeling a flutter of excitement rise within her chest. The warnings only fueled her desire to explore Dot today. She would begin the journey. With a quiet breath, she stepped forward, the cool morning air brushing against her cheeks as she started her trek toward the mountain. The path before her was winding and uneven, but her heart was light, and she walked with determination. The forest that surrounded the village was dense with towering trees and thick foliage. The scent of pine mixed with the earthy smell of damp soil and leaves filled the air, and the sound of distant birds calling to one another carried through the stillness. As Gerda walked deeper into the woods, her steps light on the mossy ground, she felt the weight of the world fall away. The village, her family, and her responsibilities were all behind her now, and the path ahead was her own to choose. She could feel the mountain's pull growing stronger the closer she got. The further she ventured into the forest, the quieter it became. The leaves seemed to hush around her, the distant calls of birds fading into nothing. Only the sound of her breath and the soft rustling of her cloak filled the silence. Gerda's heart raced with excitement, but there was also a flutter of nervousness, the tiniest seed of doubt beginning to creep in, but she shook it off. She was ready for this. She had spent her entire life in the village, surrounded by stories of adventure and discovery. Now it was her turn to be the hero. She would find out what the goblins were hiding. She would prove that she was brave enough to venture into the heart of the mountain. The deeper she walked, the more the sunlight dimmed, as though the trees were trying to shield her from the world outside. The air was cool and moist, the ground beneath her feet soft with layers of fallen leaves and moss. Each step seemed to pull her further away from the familiar, but Gerda embraced it. She was moving toward something unknown, something that was hers to discover. Mountain loomed ahead, but it didn't feel threatening. Instead, it felt like an invitation, waiting for her to take the next step. A sudden shiver ran down her spine, and she paused for a moment. The path before her seemed to narrow, the trees closing in as though trying to guide her toward the mountain. Gerda swallowed her doubts and pressed forward. She was determined to reach the base of the mountain by nightfall dot as she moved forward. The mountain grew more imposing. The air seemed to thicken, the silence around her more intense. But Gerda's pace did not falter. The adventure was just beginning, and she could feel it in every part of her excitement, her curiosity, and even the tiny trace of fear that made her feel more alive than she had ever felt before. The path seemed endless, but the pull of the mountain was too strong. She couldn't stop now. The closer Gerda got to the mountain, the more the forest seemed to shift around her. What had started as a vibrant and welcoming space soon grew quieter, the sounds of the birds and rustling leaves fading into a thick, oppressive silence. The trees, once full of life, seemed to become more gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching down toward her like long, clawed fingers. The path she walked on became narrower, winding around dense foliage, and soon the air grew heavier, colder. The light that filtered through the branches above became dimmer, and Gerda found herself squinting into the growing shadows. The wind had picked up, swirling around her in strange, spiraling gusts. The trees seemed to groan, as if whispering in a language she couldn't understand, adding to the eerie feeling that had settled deep in her bones. The path was no longer clear, and Gerda had to push her way through thick underbrush, her hands brushing against the wet, cool leaves that clung to her cloak dot. As she moved forward, she noticed something strange. The deeper she ventured, the more the forest seemed to feel like a living thing, like the very earth itself was watching her, guiding her toward the heart of the mountain. She could almost hear faint footsteps behind her, the sound of something. Following, though, whenever she turned to look, there was no one there. It was as though the forest was alive with secrets, all of them hidden just beyond the reach of her understanding. Her heart beat faster as she approached a clearing, the trees parting like a curtain, revealing the base of the mountain. A large, jagged rock formation rose before her, its surface covered in a tangle of vines. The air here felt darker, as though the mountain itself was casting a shadow over everything around it. Gerda could almost feel a cold energy emanating from the rocks, the kind of presence that seemed to sink deep into her skin. This was it. The place the villagers had always warned her about. The entrance to the goblin lair. The clearing was silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves as the wind stirred them. Gerda stood still for a moment, taking in the vastness of the mountain. It loomed before her like a sleeping giant, its sheer presence making her feel as if she were standing at the edge of the world. She could hear the faintest whispers in the air, like distant voices calling her name. The mountain's entrance was hidden behind the thick vines, their dark green leaves like a curtain obscuring the path forward. Gerda hesitated. It was as if the mountain were inviting her in, urging her to cross into the unknown. She stood on the edge, her breath shallow, unsure of what lay ahead, but still driven by that compelling desire to uncover the mysteries it held. She pushed aside the vines, her fingers brushing against the cool, rough stone of the mountain. The moment she entered the dark and cave-like entrance, the air felt even heavier, filled with an unnatural stillness. She could sense something watching her, though the darkness ahead swallowed the view. The path before her wound deeper into the heart of the mountain, twisting and turning like a labyrinth. "Hello?" Gerda called out into the darkness, her voice swallowed by the weight of the mountain dog. No answer came. She took a step forward, her boots echoing softly on the stone floor. The silence around her felt suffocating, but she pressed on, determined to see this journey through. The walls of the mountain narrowed, and the temperature seemed to drop with every step she took. Her breath came out in visible puffs as she moved deeper into the heart of the lair. The sound of her steps became louder in the silence, almost like footsteps in a dream. Then, just as she thought she might be alone forever in this quiet, oppressive space, a strange sound echoed ahead. The faintest whisper, like the rustling of pages in an old book. It was distant, and yet it felt close. A presence moving just beyond the reach of her vision. She stopped and listened, heart thudding in her chest. The whisper seemed to be calling her name, and then she heard something else, a soft giggle, followed by the scratching sound of claws on stone. "Who's there?" Gerda called, trying to sound brave, but her voice trembled. There was a pause, then the sound of something shifting. In the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the gloom, staring at her from the shadows. They blinked, then the voice of the goblin rang out, its tone sweet yet tinged with mockery. "So you've come to play, little girl?" The voice purred, the words wrapping around her like a coil. "We've been expecting you." Gerda's heart raced as the goblin's voice echoed through the cave, reverberating off the stone walls. The glowing eyes in the darkness stared at her, and she felt a chill crawl down her spine. But despite the fear gnawing at her, there was something about the goblin's tone that seemed to draw her in, like an unspoken challenge. Curiosity won over fear, and Gerda steeled herself, taking a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" Gerda asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. Her voice echoed in the cavernous space, but the goblin did not answer immediately. Instead, the scratching sound grew louder, and out of the shadows emerged a figure tall and thin, with glowing eyes that flickered like the light of a dying flame. The goblin stepped into the dim light, its shape becoming clearer. Its features were distorted, its skin pale and slightly translucent, with sharp, elongated fingers that seemed to stretch unnaturally toward Gerda. Its smile was wide, too wide, showing rows of sharp yellow teeth. The goblin's voice was like the sound of sandpaper against stone, raspy and unnerving. "You've crossed the threshold, little one," it said, its voice sweet but dripping with mockery. "Do you know what that means?" Gerda stood still, heart pounding in her chest. The goblin's eyes never left her face, and she felt an intense pressure, as if the very air around her were thick with the creature's presence. "You've entered my domain," the goblin continued, its smile widening. "And in my domain, there are rules. The mountain doesn't simply let anyone pass through, you see. It demands a game, a contest of wits. And you, my dear, are the one who will play." Gerda blinked, confusion clouding her thoughts. A game? She had come to the mountain seeking answers, but now the goblin was speaking of games, of challenges. How was this part of the journey? The goblin took a step closer, its form now looming above her. Gerda felt a bead of sweat form on her brow as the creature's laughter filled the air. "Fear not," it hissed. "This will not be a game of strength, but of cunning. I will pose riddles, and if you answer them correctly, you may pass. But if you fail..." The goblin's eyes narrowed. "You will remain here in my domain forever." The air grew colder still, and Gerda's mind raced. She didn't come to the mountain to be trapped, to be caught in some goblin's game. She came to understand the secrets of the mountain, to uncover the truth hidden within it. But now, it seemed, the goblins had different plans. "You will be tested," the goblin crooned, its voice thick with satisfaction. "Answer me this, little girl, and I will grant you your first step toward freedom. Fail, and you will never leave this place." Gerda gathered all her courage and nodded, bracing herself. The goblin's riddles were said to be tricky, impossible for most to solve, but Gerda's resolve was strong. She wasn't going to let this creature stand in the way of her journey. She would not be trapped. The goblin's eyes gleamed with anticipation, and it spoke in a low, ominous tone. "I have cities, but no houses. I have forests, but no trees. I have rivers, but no water. What am I?" Gerda blinked in surprise. The riddle was unlike anything she had encountered before, and for a moment, the pressure of the mountain seemed to press in on her, stifling her thoughts. The goblin waited, its expression growing darker with each passing second. Her mind raced through possibilities, trying to connect the strange clues in the riddle. The mountain had been full of illusions, shifting shapes, and hidden meanings. Could this be the key? She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence guide her thoughts. Then, as if a spark of clarity ignited within her, the answer came to her with startling clarity. "A map," she exclaimed, her voice steady despite the intense pressure that still weighed on her chest. "A map has cities, forests, and rivers, but no houses, trees, or water." The goblin froze, its eerie smile faltering for just a moment before it regained its composure. For a brief moment, the mountain seemed to hold its breath, as if the very rocks were waiting for the goblin's response. The goblin's glowing eyes flickered, a spark of admiration or perhaps surprise shining in them. "You've answered correctly," the goblin said, its voice laced with grudging respect. "You're cleverer than I thought." But this was only the first test. The tension in the air began to lift, just slightly, as the goblin stepped back into the shadows. It gestured toward the winding path that led deeper into the mountain. "Continue your journey, Gerda," it said, "but beware the next test will be even more difficult." Gerda exhaled a shaky breath and stepped forward, her heart still racing, but her resolve stronger than ever. She had answered the first riddle, but she knew that the path ahead was still fraught with danger. The goblin's tricks were far from over, but for the first time since entering the mountain, Gerda felt a spark of hope that the mountain was not just a place of terror. It was a place of lessons, and each test she faced brought her one step closer to the truth she sought. Gerda continued deeper into the mountain, her mind still buzzing with the intensity of the riddle. The air grew colder with each step she took, and the silence seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. The goblin's lair was like an endless maze of winding tunnels and dark chambers, each one more mysterious than the last. The walls seemed to shift and change, as though the very stone of the mountain had a will of its own, warping to confuse and trap her. Gerda felt the weight of the mountain pressing down on her, but she kept moving forward, determined to reach the heart of this place. The mountain's labyrinth seemed endless, and with each turn, Gerda began to wonder if she had made a mistake by venturing so far in. The path ahead felt unfamiliar, almost as if the mountain was toying with her. The sense of uncertainty crept into her thoughts. She couldn't help but wonder if she was truly meant to face what lay ahead, or if the goblins had already won by planting seeds of doubt in her heart. But then, as she rounded a corner, the path opened up into a large, dimly lit chamber. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, glowing faintly in the shadows. At the center of the room stood an ancient goblin throne, surrounded by flickering torches that cast long shadows across the floor. The air felt thick with the weight of centuries, and the eerie silence of the room made Gerda feel as though she were intruding on something sacred, something old and powerful. And then she heard it. A soft voice, almost a whisper, calling her name. Gerda, she froze. The voice was not like the goblin's usual mocking tones. This voice was softer, more melancholic, yet somehow still filled with an unsettling quality. It seemed to come from all directions at once, swirling around her like a wind, wrapping itself around her thoughts. "Who's there?" Gerda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, but she didn't move. She could feel the room watching her, as though the very walls were waiting for her to make a choice. There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke again, this time clearer, as though it were closer. I am the one who guards the final truth of the mountain, it said, a note of sadness in the voice. The goblins are but one aspect of this place. I am something more ancient, more rooted in the earth itself. The mountain is not merely a place of deception, it is a place of sacrifice, of choice. Gerda felt a shiver run through her as the voice continued. You seek the truth, Gerda, but the truth is not something you can simply claim. You must decide what you are willing to sacrifice in order to uncover it. Asterisk, a sudden cold gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the torches and plunging the room into darkness. Gerda's heart raced as her eyes adjusted to the gloom. Her breath formed a cloud in the icy air. She could still hear the voice, now seeming to come from somewhere within her mind. Do you wish to leave this place, Gerda? Do you seek the answers you've come for, even if they come at a cost? What are you willing to give? The room seemed to close in around her, the silence now deafening. She could feel the weight of the mountain's ancient presence pressing against her. The air seemed to thicken, as if the very fabric of the world around her was waiting for her answer. The voice spoke again, its tone no longer haunting, but wise, almost kindly. Not every truth is meant to be understood in full. Not every journey leads to the destination you expect, but in seeking the truth, you will find yourself. Gerda swallowed hard, the words weighing on her chest. She had come here seeking answers, seeking the truth about the mountain, about the goblins, and perhaps about herself. But now, it seemed the mountain was offering something more, an opportunity to discover who she truly was and what she was. Truly willing to face the sacrifice that was demanded of her, whatever it was, would not be a physical one. It would be something deeper, something more personal. She knew this. In the stillness, Gerda realized that the mountain had not only presented her with a physical challenge, but a spiritual one as well. This was no ordinary riddle. This was a question about her own soul, her own purpose in this strange world. Closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She had been given the chance to face the darkness, both around her and within her. And now it was time to make her choice. She would not turn back. She would face the truth, no matter what it might cost her. But the mountain had already given her the greatest gift it could offer, the chance to choose. And in that choice, Gerda found her strength thought the cold air wrapped around Gerda like a heavy cloak as she took the first step deeper into the chamber. The soft glow from the torchlight faded away into the oppressive darkness, and she could no longer see her surroundings clearly. Her senses heightened in the dark, each creak of stone, each distant whisper seemed to magnify as if the mountain itself were alive, breathing with her every movement. The goblin's voice, now faint and echoing through the cave, called to her once again. Do you understand what has been asked of you, Gerda? It whispered, its tone no longer mocking, but full of curiosity. The mountain doesn't give its answers freely. You must choose. Will you walk the path of the truth, no matter the cost? Gerda felt her heart beating louder in her chest as the uncertainty gripped her. The voice was more than just an echo. It was inside her mind now, a constant, unsettling presence. She wanted to trust that the journey would bring her clarity, but she was beginning to feel the weight of it all. What truth did the mountain hold? What sacrifice would she be asked to make? The unknowns pressed down on her, filling the space around her with dread, and yet she did not turn back. The choice was in her hands, dot in the distance. A faint light appeared through the darkness, growing brighter as she walked toward it. The goblins, if they were watching, were silent now, giving her the space she needed to decide. She knew they were not far, but their presence no longer frightened her. The mountain had shifted, its ancient power now seemed less like a threat and more like a test of her courage and resolve. Gerda's footsteps grew more confident as she walked toward the light. She could sense the presence of something powerful, ahead, something that could change everything. The light wasn't coming from torches or candles, but from an otherworldly glow emanating from the walls themselves. As if the mountain had absorbed the essence of something deeper. As she moved closer, the air grew warmer, though the atmosphere was still thick with anticipation. The light swirled in the cavern, becoming almost tangible, like a mist made of light and shadow, wrapping around Gerda's body like a warm embrace. The whispers grew louder, but this time they were not the goblins' voices. Instead, they seemed to be the voices of the mountain itself, ancient and wise. "Do you seek the truth, Gerda?" One voice asked, softer than the others. "You have come this far, but remember, the truth is not always what you expect. It comes with burdens, with costs, but also with the freedom to shape your own path." Her heart pounded in her chest as the light grew more intense, almost blinding now. The fog-like mist moved gently around her, swirling in patterns that felt deliberate, guiding her towards something unknown. She felt a pull, a force drawing her deeper into the light, and she could not resist. "This is your final test," the voice whispered again, clearer now. "You must leave behind what you thought you knew. Only then can you claim the truth." Gerda felt as if her very being were being torn between two worlds. The path she had walked on, the village she had come from, the people she had known home. Of it seemed like a distant memory, fading into the background of this strange new reality. Her thoughts swirled like the mist around her. She could feel the weight of her past clinging to her, the expectations of others and her own ambitions, pressing down on her shoulders. But deep inside, she knew the truth was not in the things she left behind. It was in the freedom to move forward, to embrace what lay ahead, even if it was not what she had imagined. As the light reached its peak, enveloping her completely, she stood still for a moment, letting the warmth of it fill her, the embrace of acceptance washing over her. It was as if the mountain had recognized her for what she was, someone who had come to understand the need for growth, for transformation, even if it meant letting go of everything familiar. The last whisper faded, leaving only the hum of the light around her dot, and then, as if the mountain itself had granted her permission, Gerda stepped forward, feeling a sense of clarity she had never known before. The path ahead, though still uncertain, felt like her own. The weight of the mountain's challenges seemed to fall away, and she knew she was no longer just a wanderer in this dark labyrinth. She was someone who had found her place in it. Asterisk, the mountain began to shift around Gerda, the light enveloping her in a soft golden glow. The deeper she walked, the more the mist seemed to whisper, its voices now gentle and welcoming. Her steps were no longer heavy with doubt. Instead, each movement felt light, as though the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. The oppressive silence that had once haunted the mountain had softened, replaced by the soothing hum of the mountain itself, a hum that seemed to resonate within her very chest, that she continued deeper into the heart of the mountain, where the light seemed to come from within the stone itself. The walls pulsed with energy, warm and comforting, guiding her through a cavernous passage. The air, once cold and heavy, now felt like the soft caress of a spring breeze, full of life and promise. Gerda could feel the hum of the earth, a vibration deep within her being, as though the mountain was alive with stories and wisdom that stretched back centuries. Dot at the center of the cavern, the light began to coalesce into a beautiful radiant crystal, its glow so pure that it illuminated the entire space. The crystal pulsed gently, each beat of its light echoing in time with Gerda's own heartbeat. She stood before it, awestruck by its beauty and power. It was as though the very essence of the mountain had taken shape in this single glowing form. It was not just a physical object. It felt like the embodiment of all the answers she had sought. The truth lies within you, the soft voice whispered again, its tone now calm and reassuring. You have faced the darkness and emerged into the light. You have learned that the journey is not just about finding what is hidden in the world. It is about discovering what is within yourself. Gerda stepped closer to the crystal, feeling an irresistible pull toward it. As she approached, the warmth from the crystal washed over her, filling her with a deep sense of peace. The hum of the mountain seemed to resonate with her thoughts, calming her mind and stilling the restless questions that had once plagued her. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the crystal's energy fill her, and in that moment, she felt a sense of unity with the world around her. The answers she had been searching for were not external. They had always been inside her, waiting to be uncovered. The voice spoke again, its words soft but filled with profound wisdom. The mountain's power is not in its hidden treasures or its deceptive tricks, Gerda. It is in the lessons it teaches. You have learned that true strength does not come from conquering others, but from mastering yourself. The path you walk is not one of dominance, but of harmony with yourself. with the world around you and with the deeper currents of life. As Gerda stood before the crystal, her mind began to clear. She understood now that the goblins, the tests, and the mountain's tricks had all been part of her inner journey. The physical challenges she faced had mirrored the internal struggles of her heart, her doubts, her fears, her search for meaning. And now, standing in the heart of the mountain, she understood that the real victory was not in escaping the goblins, but in embracing the stillness and peace that had always been within her reach. The mountain had given her more than just a test of courage. It had shown her that she was capable of finding strength through stillness, of finding wisdom in quiet moments. She had walked through the labyrinth of her own heart, confronting the darkness that had once scared her, and in doing so, she had found the light. Gerda stepped back, her heart light with understanding. She was no longer the girl who had set out to conquer the mountain. She was the woman who had discovered that true strength lay not in fighting the world, but in learning to listen to it, in finding balance and peace within. The goblins no longer mattered. Their tricks, their illusions were just part of the journey, a journey that had led her here, to the crystal of truth. The light from the crystal faded softly and the air around Gerda grew still. The mountain had no more tests to offer. Gerda had passed them all. She felt the presence of the mountain like a gentle hand resting on her shoulder, as though it were guiding her back to where she belonged. But now, Gerda understood something deeper. She was no longer bound by the mountain or its illusions. She was free, and the journey was hers to define. She turned away from the crystal, stepping out of the cavern. The path ahead was now open, and she felt a deep sense of peace within her. The mountain had taught her what she had always needed, to know that the true magic in life lies not in the things we seek, but in the quiet, still moments when we finally listen to ourselves. Gerda's heart was lighter now, her mind unburdened by the weight of uncertainty. The mountain, once dark and oppressive, now seemed to hum with a peaceful energy, its ancient stones no longer bearing down on her. The echoes of the goblins' laughter faded into the background, replaced by the soft rustling of the leaves outside, the gentle breeze that whispered through the mountain steps. She had stepped beyond the trials, beyond the tests and tricks, into something that felt almost sacred, the realization that her journey had always been about learning to find balance, both within herself and in the world around her. The path she walked now was no longer a maze of confusion. It was a clear and open way, leading her toward the exit, but with each step she took, it was as if she were walking out of the mountain and into a new chapter of her life. There was no hurry, no sense of urgency. The mountain had been a place of self-discovery, and now she could leave it behind with gratitude and peace. As she moved through the winding corridors, the walls no longer seemed to shift or warp. The gloom that once filled the air was replaced by a soft, golden light that filtered through cracks in the stone. The mist that had once surrounded her was now a soft fog, dissipating like a gentle breath, revealing the lush forest outside. For the first time since entering the mountain, Gerda felt a deep connection to the world around her. The mountain was no longer an adversary. It was a part of her, shaped her, but no longer defined her. She stepped out of the mountain's shadow and into the light of the world beyond. The forest stretched out before her, the trees standing tall and proud, as if welcoming her back into the embrace of nature. The air was fresh, the sun shining through the branches, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. Gerda paused for a moment, breathing in the sweet, clean scent of the earth, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. The world felt new, as if she were seeing it for the first time. The quiet wisdom of the mountain had settled deep within her, and she understood now that this was where her true journey had begun, not in the physical trek through the mountain, but in the transformation of her soul. The goblins, the illusions, the tricks, all of them were fading memories, like distant echoes that held no power over her anymore. The mountain, with all its mysteries, had given her one final gift, the ability to trust in her own intuition, to find peace in the quiet moments, and to embrace the unknown without fear. It had shown her that she didn't need to conquer the world, but simply to accept it for what it was. Her journey wasn't about escaping, it was about returning to herself. And now, as the path before her unfolded, Gerda felt that she was walking, in tune with the rhythm of the world, no longer bound by expectations, no longer searching for something outside herself. She had discovered the truth that had always been there, that the journey was never about finding the right answers, but about embracing the questions, the doubts, and the unknowns along the way. The forest ahead seemed to welcome her, its vibrant colors more alive than ever before. Birds fluttered from tree to tree, their melodies adding to the symphony of sounds around her. Gerda could feel the ground beneath her feet, soft and firm, as if the earth itself was supporting her every step. She was no longer lost, no longer seeking. She had found what she had been looking for, not in the mountain or its illusions, but in the quiet understanding of herself. As she continued on, Gerda felt the mountain's presence behind her faint, but still there, like a memory that shaped her. It would always be a part of her, a chapter in her story. But now, she was ready to move forward, knowing that the answers she sought were not in distant places, but within her all along. The mountain had shown her that true strength came from acceptance of herself, of the journey, and of the world as it was. With one final breath, Gerda stepped forward into the world she had always belonged to, now with a heart full of peace, a soul at rest, and the quiet understanding that she was no longer just an adventurer, she was whole. As Gerda stepped beyond the shadows of the mountain and into the open air, she felt the weight of her journey slowly lift. The dense forest that had once seemed so foreboding now felt like a sanctuary, its trees towering above her, their leaves swaying gently in the breeze. The air was fresh, the scent of pine mingling with the faintest trace of earth and rain. The sun, now high in the sky, bathed the world in a golden light, casting soft, dappled shadows across the forest floor. Every sound, every rustle of leaves, every chirp of birds was filled with life and vibrancy. Gerda paused for a moment, closing her eyes to take in the peace that surrounded her. The journey she had undertaken had transformed her, and as she stood in this beautiful, tranquil landscape, she realized just how far she had come. The fear and doubt that had once gripped her heart now seemed like distant memories, fading with each passing breath. She had faced the darkness of the mountain, the goblins' tricks, and the confusion that threatened to pull her into the void. But now, as she stood in the warmth of the sun, she understood that her greatest triumph was not in escaping the mountain, but in embracing the journey itself, the inner growth, the quiet strength, and the peace she had found along the way. The peace was more than just the absence of danger. It was the freedom to be herself, to no longer be bound by the expectations of others or the need for external validation. The mountain had been a place of testing, but it had also been a place of self-discovery, a place where Gerda learned to trust her instincts, to follow her heart, and to recognize that sometimes the most important answers lie not in finding the right path, but in embracing the uncertainty of the journey. Asterisk, the air around her was still, but in a peaceful way. There was no rushing wind, no sense of urgency. Time seemed to slow, as if the very earth had paused, allowing Gerda to catch her breath and reflect on everything she had learned. It was vast and full of mysteries, but for now, all that mattered was this moment, this stillness, this wholeness that filled her being. Gerda continued down the path, her steps light and measured. There was no hurry. She no longer sought the answers that once drove her forward. She had found what she needed in the quiet, in the stillness, in the embrace of the world that surrounded her. As she walked, the sun's rays filtered through the trees, warming her skin, and the soft murmur of the forest filled the space around her with calm. For the first time since entering the mountain, Gerda felt connected to everything. She felt the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the flow of life in the air, the quiet rhythm of the world. It was as if she were no longer separate from the forest, from the mountains, from the sky. She was a part of it all, moving through it with ease, a part of something much bigger than herself. Her mind drifted back to the mountain now, just a distant memory, like a faded dream. She had walked its dark paths, faced its trials, and emerged not just unscathed, but renewed. The goblins, with their tricks and illusions, were no longer relevant. The truth she had sought was never buried in the mountain or hidden in some mysterious secret. The truth had always been within her, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be embraced. She smiled softly to herself, feeling a quiet satisfaction wash over her. There was no need to prove herself anymore. There was no need for grand gestures or external validation. She was enough. The mountain had shown her that the greatest journey one could undertake was the one that led inward, to the heart and soul of who we truly are. The forest around her seemed to sigh in agreement, the leaves rustling in the soft breeze, as if the world itself was acknowledging her newfound peace. The sunshine wrapped her in its warmth, and the earth beneath her feet felt solid, comforting. Gerda continued walking, feeling the path ahead open up before her, smooth and clear. The mountain's lessons were still with her, but they no longer held power over her. They had taught her what she needed to know, and now she was ready to move forward with grace, peace, and clarity. As she walked, Gerda realized that the world had not changed. It had always been this beautiful, this full of quiet moments and subtle magic. It was she who had changed, who had learned to see the world with new eyes. And now, with each step, she felt a deep connection to the world around her, a connection built on understanding, acceptance, and the quiet knowing that she was exactly where she needed to be.